Hey guys, what's up? Zyflin here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the best abilities to get via the Helminth system. So if you haven't played Warframe in a while, or you haven't played since the Heart of Deimos update to be specific, the Heart of Deimos update brought this thing called the Helminth system, and basically what the Helminth system allows you to do is to take the regular version of any Warframe, not the Prime, sacrifice it, and then have this predetermined ability, and take this ability and put it on any other frame in the game. So an example would be if you had the regular version of Ash, you would take Ash, sit him down in this chair, sacrifice that Ash Warframe. That would give you the Shuriken ability, right? You could take the Shuriken ability and equip that to any Warframe in any of their ability slots, right? So you could take Octavia and replace her 4th ability, for example, with Shuriken. And then you could go ahead and throw on the Seeking Shuriken augment and make a whole Seeking Shuriken build if you wanted to do that on Octavia, right? With the rest of her kit. So the Helminth system is pretty like resource intensive, right? Because it is essentially asking you to go out and farm another one of the frames that you want to sacrifice, right? Implying you're the collector type of person and you want to have like all of the Warframes, right? Sacrificing a Warframe is definitely a big ask, and it's just like a big ask farming up the regular version again, and then of course you have to go through the crafting process again and all that there type of stuff. So knowing which abilities to get first or to shoot for first is super important, so you can go ahead and plan ahead. So the first ability that we're going to talk about is Glim. Now you're going to see Glim on a lot of builds nowadays for the simple fact that it is a crowd control ability. It's also a lifesteal ability, right? So you activate Glim, it's a channeling ability, right? So it drains energy over time, so you're building for the likes of efficiency and duration, which a lot of frames do build for nowadays. And basically what happens is the more power strength you have on with Glim, the slower the enemies are going to be. So you can do some wacky stuff with this. You can use other crowd control abilities. So let's say, for example, Banshee Silence, which makes the enemies have like a stun animation, right? So you have Glim active and you have Silence affecting the enemies. They're going through the stun animation, but it is extremely slowed. So they're going to be crowd controlled for a much longer time, which is going to help with survivability on top of the lifesteal, which Glim already gives you, right? So you can do some really crazy stuff with this. You can stack Glim with the likes of Nova Slow. You can stack it with like Arcane Eruption. Just some crazy overall stuff. You get Glim from subsuming Sevagoth, and you get Sevagoth, I think his blueprint is from the Call of the Tempestari quest, and then the rest of his parts come from the, what's it called, the Void Storms, right? So you got to go ahead and do some Void Storms to get his stuff. I like Sevagoth as a frame. I think he's kind of cool. He is just kind of, at least from my perspective, like a better Valkyr, right? Or a worse Valkyr, depending on your perspective. So I personally wouldn't have a problem with subsuming or sacrificing my first Sevagoth because, you know, you can go ahead and farm him again. I'm pretty sure you can pick up his blueprint again from either the market or Cephalon Samaris. It's one of those two, not too sure, but getting Glim is super important because you're going to see this on a lot of builds nowadays, especially like the likes of, let's say, a Banshee Lich Hunter build, right? So because Banshee is a pretty squishy frame in general, and she already has that silence ability, so that really strong crowd control ability from the get-go, and Glim just pairs very, very well with that, right? So that segues us into the next ability that I recommend picking up, which is Silence from Banshee. So Silence is super strong because there's a lot of different uses for it. You can use it to stun the Acolytes and Steel Path. You can use it to just generally stun enemies. You can use it to aid in power leveling and stuff like that. It's just a really strong ability. You build for it in a kind of different way, right? So usually whenever you think about a crowd control ability, you think about maxing out your range, maxing out your duration. With Banshee, it's a little bit different, or with Silence, it's a little bit different. You actually want to have less range, right? So like 100% or something like that, maybe lower sometimes. And you want to be like running towards the enemies, letting them go through the stun animation. Then whenever that finishes, running away from them and back at them again to replay that stun animation, right? So that's why Silence is really good, because whenever you're just like running around the mission, it's just going to immediately stun some enemies, if I can speak English, stun some enemies. It's super strong, and because it stuns the Acolytes and Steel Path as well, it's just a no-brainer really to pick up. It's just a super good ability, and it helps really well whenever you're running around and meleeing and stuff like that, right? So next up, we've got Eclipse from Mirage. Now, Eclipse is one of the best damage buffing abilities in the game, and you can throw this pretty much on any frame in the game, right? So an honorable mention would go to Rhino's Roar as well. Another really good damage buffing ability. You can do some like wacky things by you know, stacking either Roar or Eclipse with some other damage buffing augments, for example. Like you can do what's it called, Excalibur's Radial Javelin augment, which increases your melee damage and roar and stuff like that, and get some crazy damage numbers, right? Or you can do like the likes of Eclipse and Vault's first ability, right? It has an augment as well, which increases the amount of electric damage you're dealing. So there's some really crazy combinations that you can pull off with Eclipse. Of course, your best interest is to stack duration and stack power strength whenever it comes to Eclipse, and also stand in as much light as you possibly can, because remember, Eclipse is kind of like a two-sided ability. So whenever you're standing in the dark is going to be damage reduction, but whenever you're standing in the light, it is a damage buff. So it does have a diminished effect because it is such a strong ability, right? So you're not getting as much of a buff off Eclipse whenever it is applied to another Warframe, because it's so strong. It's not going to be the exact same as it is on Mirage. So the buff amount is going to be different. So it's still a super strong ability, and I'm pretty sure the same goes for Roar as well. You know, it's a diminished effect too. Yeah, so it's diminished damage increase. There you go. And then the Eclipse one is, what's it say? Diminished effectiveness, right? So it's just less overall, but it's still extremely strong, right? The next ability that I want to talk about is Pillage. Now, Pillage is super strong. This doesn't have any type of like diminished effect or anything like this. This is really good for keeping you alive, right? If you're not aware, Warframe now has the mechanic of shield gating. Shield gating is basically if you have like 100% of your shields, right? So your shield or your maximum shield capacity could be like 75, right? So that could be 100% of your shields. As long as you have 100% of your shields, if you take fatal damage, right? So if an enemy dealt damage that would sort of like bleed into your health, your shields are going to soak that damage up, and it's going to give you invulnerability for like 1.3 seconds or something like that, right? So just being able to regen your shields by casting Pillage is really strong. It drains the enemy shields, and it also armor strips, right? So you could apply this to a frame like Mesa who lacks armor stripping, and just use it to sort of like buff up your damage, or unintentionally buff up your damage. Super strong ability, great for keeping you alive, great for refreshing your shield gating, great for stripping away armor and shields. Overall, just amazing ability, and it does it in like a circle around you as well. Super nice. Last but not least, I'm going to talk about like a few other honorable mentions as well. We've got ensnare. So this is another crowd control ability. The fifth spot, I was kind of like, do I want to throw on ensnare? Because there are a lot of other really good abilities. But ensnare is just a really good one because of how it just sort of like spreads to other enemies. It totally crowd controls an enemy, and then it just spreads to other ones and pulls them in. So just for like gripping enemies up to deal AoE damage or melee damage or something of the sort, ensnare is a really good ability, and you can ensnare like a lot of targets, right? You can ensnare the likes of a Lich, you can ensnare the likes of a Demolist in, what's that game mode called? Disruption, right? You can do a lot with ensnare. It's a crazy ability. Then whenever it comes to other abilities that I recommend, Breach Surge is very nice, right? Because you have a damage multiplier on this as well. So basically you blind an enemy and then you shoot that enemy, and then a radiation sort of like little ball of damage is going to go to the other enemy. You've seen it in the little preview there. That's really nice for just spreading a lot of damage. You've also got dispensary, which is really strong. So that comes from Protea. This is just going to help you like sustain your energy, health, and possibly your heavy gun ammo, so your Arcwing heavy gun, if you're doing the likes of, let's say, a Prophet Taker, or maybe even in Eidolons, for example, you can use this type of ability. If we scroll down a little bit, there's Glim again. We've got some of the infested ones. Larva is kind of like a worse ensnare, but it is useful, for example, if you were to put it on the likes of Protea, because you can just go ahead, throw down the larva. It's going to suck in a ton of enemies, grip them up, and then you can use Protea's second ability, which is going to gain more damage for the amount of consecutive hits that it gets, right? So in that sense, larva is really good. It's a very specific niche. 9 times out of 10, I would go for ensnare over larva. But if you haven't got a spare Cora laying around and you have a spare Nidus laying around, or let's say you find a Nidus set easier to farm than a Cora set, well, then you can go this route instead, right? Even though I would say that Cora is probably easier to farm than Nidus. Then again, the Nidus farm is kind of brain dead. Both of the farms are kind of annoying. It just depends which one you find more tolerable, right? So next up we have really a blind. No, Resonator is pretty nice as well. It's just another crowd control ability from Octavia, super strong. We already mentioned Roar, super strong. Shock is it's all right. Shooting Gallery is another great one because it's a crowd control and a damage buff. Shuriken, so this is the armor strip. It's only really worth it if you're going to be building the armor strip, but there are other methods of armor stripping. There are other warframes in the game, such as Banshee, for example, who can armor strip with their augment. You can armor strip with the likes of the Vastalok or the Sarpa using what's that one mod called? Is it Shattering Impact? I'm just going to make sure. Where's my alliance chat? I'm pretty sure it's Shattering Impact. It is Shattering Impact. So this is just going to, you know, take away some enemy armor whenever you deal impact damage, right? So that's super nice. Let's just scroll down a little bit. We already talked about Silence. Terrify is not that good. Warcry is kind of good on melee warframes. So for example, you could pair this with Excalibur, his Exalted Blade, right? You could replace his Slash Dash and have Warcry on, and then you can throw on the Eternal War Augment, but that's a very niche use. Airburst, if I can speak English. Airburst is another really dang strong one because it's just good at gripping enemies up. It's kind of like a better larva, right? But you can just sort of like spam it, right? A lot of people like to run this on Baruch, for example. So Baruch, you sort of like spam his abilities, and then that's how you reduce the enrage or whatever it's called on him, his passive, so he can use his fourth ability. And you know, you just grip them up with Airburst, spam your 2, hit your 3, all that there good stuff, and then you can just go to town with your fourth ability. Aqua Blades is bad. Firewalker, Iceweave. No, Firewalker's not that good. Reeve, I'm pretty sure there's a use for Reeve if you're building like a Rhino build or something like that, but I personally haven't done it myself. Some people like to use Spectronage, but I'm not that big of a fan. Fire Blast, some people like to use that as well, but I personally wouldn't really prioritize that. If I were to prioritize some, I would say Glim, Silence, Eclipse, Pillage, and Snare for definite. Then Breach Surge. What else did I say? Maybe Larva. Definitely go for Shooting Gallery. Shooting Gallery is a good one. And then Roar finally. So that would be my sort of like 7 recommendations to go for first, really, with the Helminth system. But realistically, you know, you can do what you want. It's just those 5: Gloom, Silence, Eclipse, Pillage, and Snare. Those are kind of my most used. So those would be the ones that I recommend. But keep in mind that whenever you're like applying abilities to other warframes, you have to feed your Helminth guy. So I have to feed Nom Nom Boy, which is what I called my guy. So I have to fill up these little bars right here. So you can feed them the ones that he's sort of craving, right? That's indicated by the little green triangle, right? So that's gonna like sort of sustain him a little better, or satisfy, I guess, Monka W. So you just go ahead and feed him that. And yeah, gonna up my calcs a little bit. There you go. That's at 100%. Up this one a little bit. We get 100%. Is this one full? It's not. It is. Okay, never mind. Pefega. Bile. Yeah, sure. Why not? Then I have to... No. We good. We good. So we just go ahead and press escape. We feed him all those resources. And yeah, he's pretty much fully fed. So I could just go ahead and swap out any of the abilities of my Octavia for any of the abilities that I've got subsumed here. And the other nice thing is that you have like a pretty little garden in here for all of the warframes that you sacrifice, all the warframes that you kill. So I have a pretty nice garden. Yeah, I'm not proud of this. I am not proud of this. But anyway, guys, that is going to be it for the video. If you liked it, go ahead, hit that like button below, subscribe for more Warframe content, and I will see you guys in the next one.